We all know that children are in our future, but do children really have to be in my future? Do they have to be in your future? And what's up with all of this societal pressure to have children? Stick around for the next episode of The Point, where we'll tackle all of those questions. Welcome to The Point. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian. Last week we were talking about foreign policy, but this week we're going to talk about something completely different. Back in the days, Americans had a ton of kids because they needed help when it came to tending to their farms. But now, with the accessibility of birth control and the fact that the vast majority of us don't really work on farms, why is it that we decide to have kids, and why is it that we have more than one kid? Well, that's a topic of discussion for today's show, and we have some great experts here to talk to us about it. So let's meet our panelists. Our first panelist is Jessica Gottlieb. She is the creator of JessicaGottlieb.com, one of the nation's most popular mom blogs, and has her own YouTube channel at youtube.com/Jessica Gottlieb. Her previous television appearances include The Dr. Phil Show, CBS Evening News, CNN, Fox and Friends, and also The Daily Show. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really looking forward to having this discussion. Also, we have Dr. Marcy Cole, who is an LA-based social worker, holistic psychotherapist, and blogger for the Huffington Post. She's also the co-author of Get Your Woman On, Embracing Beauty, Grace, and the Power of Women, and the founder of Childless Mothers Connect, an online platform for women without children. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least is Dr. Judy Rosenberg. She is an LA-based psychologist, author, and creator of the Be the Cause Mind Map system for healing human disconnect. She works with individuals, couples, and families, and also offers premarital counseling. She's also the founder of GetDatingReady.com, where she counsels singles on how to choose healthy relationships. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
So let's get right to it. The first topic is my personal favorite, and it has to do with societal pressure to have children. Okay, I know that as someone in my mid-20s, I'm certainly feeling the pressure right now. So Jessica Valenti, who is an author, has a point about this. Let's hear what she has to say.
I'm Jessica Valenti, feminist writer, and my point is that having children should be a proactive decision rather than the default expectation. Right now the culture assumes that everyone wants children, and that's especially true if you're a woman. It's a standard that not only stigmatizes those people who don't want to have children, but it's also part of a culture that tells women that the most important thing that they could ever do is become a mother. And that if you don't want kids, there's something wrong with you, you're selfish, that's unnatural. So instead of asking child-free people why they don't have children or why they don't want children, I think we should be asking parents or those who want to be parents why they do want to have kids, and that's why I called my book Why Have Kids.
And I want to get everyone's thoughts on this, but before that I thought that maybe we can disclose our own personal situation. So I don't have children. I'm kind of in the camp of, am I ever going to want children? What should my decision be? Is it going to make sense? What about the environment? Although I feel like the environment is usually a good cop-out for people who don't want to have kids anyway. What about you ladies?
I have two kids, and I actually enjoy them.
All right.
And I have two sons, and they're grown, and I love them.
And
I do not have children, biological children. I have two older stepdaughters, and so I come to it that I was childless by circumstance, not by choice.
Okay,
and
Marcy.
that's a whole, you know,
that's
juicy topic.
really interesting, Marcy. So did you feel any stigma for not having your own biological children? Do you believe that society does somehow punish women who don't have their own biological children?
I did not personally experience that, but it's out there. It's out there because there's this expectation. We have this biological imperative. You know, we're wired to have kids, and then there's the religious. The Genesis, be fruitful and multiply. We're told, and then of course there's the cultural social norm that it's almost like a herd mentality where it's like, you know, I'll have what she's having, and so there's this expectation, and so many of us make our choices, as Jessica said, sort of automatically versus mindfully. So there's a stigma there for many, many people because there's that expectation. I didn't feel that. I just had my own experience with having to come to terms with, wow, this is not going to happen for me, and have to sort of grieve that and get to the other side.
It's really interesting because one accusation that I never really understood was the accusation that women who don't want to have their own children are quote unquote selfish. Judy, where does that come from? Why is that considered selfish?
You know, again, I don't see any laws saying that we have to have children. I wanted to have children. It was my free choice. Does it automatically mean that a woman is selfish? Hardly so. Just because a woman who is looking at a woman who doesn't have children from that perspective, from her perspective, it's selfish. But from a general perspective, people choose not to have children for various reasons.
Right. I mean, when I really think about it, selfish is having a child when you're not prepared to have a child, when you don't have the economic means, or when you don't have the emotional maturity to take care of a child. But Jessica, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this?
This is so loaded, because I think it's incredibly selfish to not have children. With zero judgment attached to that, because like this morning I did Pilates. That was selfish. And there's nothing wrong with having selfish parts of your life. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I don't have it in me to give up 2 years of sleep, a slender waist, most of my money, and you know, and a career to have a child. And so because I am that selfish, and again, with zero judgment on this, that's a selfish way to live your life, and that's fine. I selfishly do things all the time. I think that people could use a little more selfish in their lives.
But what if you put your energy toward, let's say, charity or philanthropic work as opposed to raising a child? I mean, not having a child doesn't necessarily mean you're a selfish individual. It might mean that you want to put your energy somewhere else.
It's that you've decided that that's part of your life that you don't have it in you to give. Whether it's because you don't want to, you don't feel equipped. There are people who don't feel equipped to challenge themselves that much. Motherhood is an incredible challenge if you're doing it right. There are moments that are very, very easy. But I don't know. We're always going to have pressure from our parents. Listen, once you've been a parent, you recognize that this is the most important thing that you're going to do.
Yeah.
I don't believe that by not being a parent that you're missing out on the most important thing that you're going to do. You're going to have a different most important thing that you're going to do. But it becomes this whole universe where like the child is this sun and you're just kind of twirling around them and you're flinging energy at it and your husband's flinging around there or your partner or whoever. And you have all of these people that are sort of revolving around this new universe that began, and there's a lot to give up. And for some people, their charity work or their philanthropy may become that new universe that they create. But it is a selfless act to raise another human being and to give up the things that you treasure, including your time and your freedom.
So you mentioned the cost of having a child, which I find fascinating, and I think that this is a number that most people don't think about before they make that decision to have a kid. So the cost of raising one child, and this is according to the USDA, is $291,570 for a child born in 2008 to parents bringing home between $57,000 and $98,000 a year. And the more money you make, the more likely you are to spend more money toward your child. So do you guys think, or you ladies think, that this is something that people are aware of, something that they really analyze and think about prior to having a child?
I'm sorry.
Well, of course not. I mean, you know,
we're the moms,
right?
So
it's like, no, but you know, I mean, there's two ways to become a parent, right? So there's this first way that Jessica Valenti would love people to do, which is like to think about or whatever. The other way is like you get drunk and horny, and all of a sudden you're somebody's mother.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of kids are, you know, kind of drunk and horny. So, you know, my husband and I looked at each other and we were like, God, you know, he's making $11 an hour. We both have health insurance. How could we not be more ready than this? And I remember my mother looking at me and going, oh, children are expensive. And I was like, yeah, we'll figure it out. You know, we'll live on love. And I think that that's a very, very standard way for people to, you know, sort of start, because you're starting in your 20s, sometimes in your early 20s, and feathering your nest is not necessarily the top of everyone's mind.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Jessica when it comes to the idea of this being how did she say it, a proactive decision versus a default expectation. And so money's just one example, right? Where it's about making this a conscious, mindful exercise. And this is what I encourage my clients that I'm working with when they're thinking about it in their 20s and 30s. It's like, okay, can you just block out all of the societal, your family dreams for you, what you thought should happen, and really get in touch with your heart in terms of what do I really want? Am I prepared financially, emotionally, to bring a child into the world, and for what reason? What is my motivation based on here? And for it to become a conscious choice versus an expectation that you apply to yourself or you think that others are expecting from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I always wonder about the quality of life issue as well. And I would like to get, some thoughts from you, Judy and Jessica, about what it was like to have your child and whether or not, and I want an honest answer because I know this is very, very difficult to discuss. Talk about your quality of life prior to having kids and after having kids. And Judy, we'll start with you.
Okay, first of all, I also want to share that I went through 4 years of infertility, and it made me crazy because I really, really, really wanted to have children, and it was, for me, unacceptable. So cut me up, do whatever you want to my body. I don't care, just squeeze a kid out of this body, okay? Wow. Basically. So I think one thing that happens is that when you're that inspired to have a baby and your husband's that inspired to have a baby with you, you kind of put the pants on or your skirt on or whatever you need to do to get the job done, and you organize yourself. And sometimes the fact that we want to give, the natural inclinations that we want to give to our children inspires us to get a better job, to work harder to earn the living, to look at alternatives for building a better house, and so on and so forth. So I think that, I'm watching my son go through this process. My son is 29 and a half years old, my daughter-in-law as well, and I just had my first grandson.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
Never guessed that.
Thank you.
Ever.
And he's 2 months old, and he is delicious. And what I'm watching happening with my son is he is getting super motivated, because sometimes when we do things for ourselves, we have one type of motivation, but when we have something to offer another human being, we have another level of motivation, and I'm really watching it kick in, and it's beautiful. So he's Mr. Entrepreneur.
So what about happiness though? Because it's one thing to be motivated, it's another thing to see your quality of life change, your happiness change. I mean, raising a child is no small feat. It's a very difficult thing to achieve, to accomplish, and to do successfully. So Jessica, what was your experience after having your own children?
Like as far as happiness?
As far as happiness, and be honest, because the reason why I'm asking this question is because there has been a plethora of research done on the happiness of parents after having children, and it shows that couples who have children, on average, are less happy than childless couples. So
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we had our firstborn right about our second year of marriage. So we weren't married a whole long time before I was pregnant. But I was blissfully happy. And nature takes care of women, because there are just hormones kind of coming at you every which way. And yes, I was weepy and overtired and terrified that we were going to be homeless. And most of it was had no basis in reality, but it's, again, there's those hormones. But it's also the happiest I'd ever been in my life. I have to tell you that holding my daughter made me love my husband that much more, and it made me much more committed to us as a family. Like, she turned us into parents. We went from being a couple to being a team, and a family. And then I had my son, which was a completely different experience because he was very sick. And so we had a few tricky days in the NICU, and those were incredibly difficult days, which I think also brought us closer together. And I imagine that if you have a challenging marriage, that those are the moments that drive people apart. Much less freedom though. I mean, I traveled all over the world with like an American Express and a stick of gum, and with just absolutely no thought. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, you need 2 strollers and 8,000 diapers, right? And changes of clothes because somebody's always throwing up on you. But that's really just the first 2 years. And now I'm at this point where I've got a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. These are my 2 favorite people. And they're fascinating and they're interesting and they challenge you emotionally and academically. And so but I don't know another way. You know, I don't know what my world would look like without kids. So that's not been my experience. But I have to say that I do see that in people around me, and I've seen women really, really challenged by the first couple of years, especially.
The first couple of years sound pretty disastrous. And by the way, I want to just make sure that I'm completely aware of the fact that I know nothing.
Me
but
too.
prior to this discussion, our executive producer, Steve-O, was like, look, the one thing you need to know prior to going into this conversation is that you don't know shit. And I'm completely aware of that. But it's so interesting to hear all these different perspectives. Judy, go ahead.
I want to lend another perspective, because I was married for 16 years, and unfortunately my marriage did not last, didn't go the rest of, you know, the happily ever after course. And I had a difficult marriage, and one thing that I'm very in touch with because of my own experience with it and watching my patients as well have this experience is the importance of a supportive husband. And we talk about postpartum blues, and I'm of the opinion that postpartum blues, women fall through the cracks not only because of their hormones, they fall through the cracks because they don't have a supportive husband by their side. So this is a system. Okay, having a child, as Jessica was talking about, they went from being a couple to being a family, and you have to kind of raise yourself to another level. You now have to be the sharer in the relationship, in the family dynamics. So my point is that the role of the father is crucial in all of this, the role of the supportive family. So when you talk about how was the first 2 years of life, oh, it was horrible. I mean, no, it wasn't horrible. The first week was, oh my God, my life is over. I'll never sleep again. Oh my God, will I ever be able to go to the bathroom and take a shower? I don't get it. He doesn't come with instructions. What do we do with him? He's adorable. It's life-changing. It's magically beautiful, and then it's also very scary. It was for me.
We were like, oh my God,
Go ahead,
did it. We
Marcy.
kept her alive.
Yeah, I know.
Your question is about happiness, right?
Yes.
And as it relates to kids. And my perspective here is that I'm very wary of broad stroke, generalizations, and so I really feel like children don't make you happy and they don't make you unhappy. The real core to happiness is how connected are to yourself, how much are you taking care of yourself, how much of a supportive network do you have, whether it be a partner and community, or for some single women it might just be community and family and friends. And I've seen women be very together, they have a kid, they move into a depleted state, and then they come back into my office. And it's not because of the child, it's because they haven't figured out a way, how can I take care of this child, because their basic needs are of priority, but carve out room for myself and ask for help and support when I need it. And so that is what I think the core of happiness is. How do we feel about our own lives and our own skin, no matter what?
Right.
And kids is just one aspect of that.
That's a great point. And the final question that I want to ask, and we have a few seconds just to answer it, is about our careers. And as women, we're expected to do it all. We're expected to have the children. We're expected to have the career. We have to stay skinny and look put together at all times. And it's this constant stress, constant societal pressure. And, I'll let you have the last word. How did you feel after you had the children? I mean, did you feel like you had to put the career on the back burner?
I'll answer this 2 ways. I'll answer it as a mother, I'll answer it as a psychologist. As a mother, I felt that I wanted both. I really did. I wanted to become a psychologist, and I wanted to have these amazing children. And I was running a stop smoking clinic at the time, and I was bringing my children, my firstborn, with me to work. As a psychologist, nature doesn't care what we think. Okay? Nature is nature. And what I have discovered in my body of information, Google Bowlby, John Bowlby, attachment theory. Babies need their mothers. They cannot have attachment breaks. What I'm currently researching and writing about is healing human disconnect. And when we disconnect from our children by going back to work too early, by getting involved in our work too early, and any kind of disconnect is going to impact our child. So this is not a matter of me first when you choose to be a parent. It's a matter of giving up your own needs in favor of the child's needs. And those who don't end up having children who then become my patients. I see this every day.
Wow.
Anxiety, separation anxiety, depression, OCD, you name it. It's in the DSM.
All right, well, I'll let you have the last word on that. And we have to take a break, but when we come back, a topic that I'm also very fascinated by, the one-child myth. Are you really screwing your child over if you refuse to give him or her a sibling? Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Point. All right, so you've made your decision, you've decided, I'm gonna have children, but you haven't decided how many children you wanna have. A lot of people these days decide that maybe one child is enough. In fact, 1 in 5 parents decide that one child is all that they need in their family. However, there is something known as the one-child myth, and it actually started in the early 1900s by a gentleman named Dr. Stanley Hall, and he did one study on one only child and concluded that being an only child is like a disease. Now, we have a journalist and columnist and author by the name of Lauren Sandler who has her own thoughts on this. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Lauren Sandler. I am a journalist and I'm an author of a forthcoming book called One and Only, which is looking at what it means to be an only child. I am one. And what it means to have an only child. I have one. It has occurred to me that we agonize about every detail about parenting, which schools, which diapers, which food to serve our kids, but we never actually talk about whether we should be having more kids or even whether we want to be having more kids. Most people tell Gallup pollsters that they have their first child because they want it, but they have their second child because they don't want to screw up their first child. Unfortunately, there's been so much research over decades and decades, I mean hundreds of studies, that show that this fear is pretty baseless. What we are basing it on is a stereotype that doesn't hold much water. The stereotype is, of course, that only children are lonely, selfish, they have terrible social skills, and I can tell you through my own travels in the research and my own interviews that only children aren't lonelier than anyone else. They're only selfish if you raise them to be jerks, and they're only socially unskilled if you keep them from school and other children. School is a great social equalizer. So if only children aren't worse off, it's worth thinking about why we're having them for our first children. Most people choose to be parents. And so that's a desire that we have to nurture and to raise a new generation. But we have other desires too. We tend to have desires to do meaningful work and to have an adulthood which is a little bit more liberated than adulthood used to be in the past. And so I wonder if it's better for many of us, and certainly better for the planet, to rethink this, why we're not having this conversation. And I think we should start it now. I think that having only children is a legitimate choice. However, it's not the choice for everyone. I am the last person to join the chorus of voices telling women what to do with their bodies. I think if you want to have a ton of kids, have them. If you want to have no kids, that is equally legitimate. But if you are only having a second kid out of fear, it's time that we examine the data and have a different conversation about it. If you're interested in learning more about this, my book will be out in June from Simon & Schuster. It's called One and Only, and in the meantime, there's information on my website, which is laurensandler.com.
All right, Lauren makes a great point there. I mean, if you spread yourself too thin and have too many kids, it would make sense that it would be more difficult to be a great parent. If you have one child and you focus all of your energy on that one child, and you make sure that you don't raise that child as a jerk, then this one-child myth is ridiculous. I mean, at least that's what I got from that point. What do you think, Judy?
I think that as parents, we're the cause of the outcome of our children's life. We have that level of responsibility. So it's not so much about whether you have one child or not have one child. It's a matter of how you're socializing your child, because I think this is what it's referring to. So if one lonely only child is sitting at home without any connection to other human beings, that's just not a great situation. So, but if that, it's dependent on the social situation. If that child is part of an extended family, if that child is going to mommy and me classes, that was back then, I don't know if they have those anymore actually. If that child is part of a nursery program, then what we're really talking about is developing that child's ability to share. And be social and learn social skills. And it's ideal if that child has a sibling, but can that child learn these skills elsewhere? Of course.
So Marcy, let me bring you into the conversation, because I'm curious why this myth still exists. I mean, it's literally based on one researcher in the early 1900s, and for some reason, even though there's been numerous studies done after that, people still believe that having one child is bad, that you're punishing that child, that you're depriving them of something very important in their lives. Why do you think that is?
Again, I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, this widespread kind of general way that we think of things that don't have any merit in reality. I mean, I agree with Judy, it's really about how you raise your one child, your two children, your 3 and 4, and it's not about how many kids you have, it's how prepared you are to raise them well. And I also like what Lauren said about the idea of fear, of making sure that you're not having a second or third child out of fear, but also I would say it also goes to the other perspective as well, not checking in with your motivations of just having one. I know I know somebody who's afraid to have more because in his family of origin, their sibling relationship was not a positive experience, okay? So he's projected that onto his parental field now and says, okay, so I only want to have one because otherwise I'm going to be depriving my child from the other perspective. So it's all about getting in touch with our, what do we really want and what are our reasons based on, and getting rid of this whole idea of this judgment to have a child, to not have a child, to have one, to have more than one. Right? I think we need to dismiss the judgment piece completely.
Yes, the judgment is hard to dismiss though, because you have so many people talking in your ear, whether it's friends or family, and how do you make a decision based on what you truly want when you have so many outside factors influencing your decision? I mean, I know that my mom is constantly influencing my decisions when it comes to relationship, marriage, all of that, having kids.
Well, you know what, can I just say, if you're adult enough to have a kid, you're adult enough to make your own decision. And please, mom, your mom, don't kill me. But don't have a kid for your mother. Don't have a kid for anybody else from you. Not have a kid because of you. It's like, enough bullshit. We're adults. You're about to be somebody's mother. Make your own decisions. Does it work for you? Does it not work for you? I personally look at mothers who have one child and I think they are working much too hard. My kids entertain each other. My daughter had my son potty trained for 3 days before I noticed that I hadn't put a diaper on him.
That's amazing. But isn't it difficult to assume that other kids will do the same thing? I mean, there is this assumption that siblings will get along. I didn't get along with my little brother. I have one sibling, a little brother, and we didn't get along until we became adults. So that's another thing that would make a mother work even harder, because you're constantly dealing with this conflict in the household. So you got very lucky.
Yes, I did. But okay, are you close with your brother now, then?
I am, and I will say this. I love having my brother in my life. It's like having an unconditional friend. I mean, friends come and go, let's keep it real. But when it comes to family, for the most part, it's not true of all families, but when it comes to most family members, they're there for you through thick and thin. And, my mom's going through some health issues, and having him by my side is definitely helping me. However, that's not to say that if I didn't have my brother, I could find that type of companionship in someone else.
That is just, you couldn't find that in anybody else. There's nobody else that's going to love your mother the way you and your brother do.
That's true.
And it's an incredible gift to give to somebody, that when it's time for somebody to take care of me, that my daughter doesn't have to do it on her own, or my son doesn't have to do it on their own. And spouses kick in a little bit here and there, but there's something really powerful in that sibling relationship.
Definitely, and I don't want to belittle that. That is important and that is special. I'm just saying that had I not had a brother, first of all, I wouldn't know what it would be like to have a sibling. So, you know, it's kind of, I guess, ignorance is bliss when it comes to that. But also, you can find that companionship, maybe not the exact same type of companionship, but you can find that type of emotional support from maybe a best friend or maybe a cousin, an aunt, whatever it is, some other family member.
Chosen family.
Chosen family.
I also want to share with you and everyone watching that when you talked about how do we quiet the voices and kind of block out all of the influential expectations around us, Gail Sheehy years ago wrote a book on adult development, and one of my favorite lines in that book is, "We know when we're all grown up when we can tolerate disappointing our parents." And that applies not just to having a kid or not having a kid, but it applies to everything in our life. What do you want to do professionally? Where do you want to live? All of these life decisions, it's really about an experience in selfhood, right? So, yeah.
Definitely. So I kind of want to go back to, you know, just a discussion about what the positive and negatives are of having siblings. Because, of course, there are positives. Everyone knows what the positives are. But what are the negatives of having more than one children?
Okay, first of all, what children really need is they need their narcissistic supplies, which is a fancy word for they need to be fed emotionally. Okay, so if they're not fed emotionally, if the mother, I have a patient that I'll just use as a quick case study. Okay, I have a patient who is way overweight. That's why she came to see me. And she idealized her mother, and she could not tolerate the idea that her mother did not have the time of day for her. Why? Because she had 7 other children. Simple as that. So what did she do in compensation for? She went internal. She went internal with her food. Okay, so that is one of the consequences I see of too many kids. It's not the too many kids, it's the too little attention. It's the not enough narcissistic supplies. So if a mother understands a little bit about attachment theory, you don't have to be a psychologist to know this stuff, but if you can understand a little bit about what the emotional needs of a child really is and how to satisfy them, then I come from an Orthodox Jewish family. Some of my family members have 11 children. Some of those children are amazingly fine and they're secure. They're what we call secure attachment as opposed to anxious attachment or avoidant attachment. Why? Because there's so much love in the family, because there's so much connection, there's so much give from the mother and the father and the community. So this is all dependent. You can't look at it from the lens of, is it good to have one child? Is it good to have 7 children? It's the context.
Right, it is the context.
Yes.
I love that you brought that up because oftentimes people forget context, especially when it comes to judging other families and the decisions that they make. But you brought up attachment theory a little bit during our break, and I think it's important for our audience to understand what that is. You know, you keep making references to it, and it's really fascinating. You know, maybe you could bring up what you were saying about how important it is for a newborn to be with her mother at all times.
Yeah, this is really, really important stuff. We've got to know that we did not make up nature. Nature's nature. When we become parents, we have to put our child's needs before our own. And so here's the deal. A 1-month-old can only stand 1 hour away from mother before they start flailing around and becoming anxious. We are their soothers. If we don't do that function, then they go into anxious disorders. A 2-month-old can only stand 2 hours. A 3-month-old, 3. A 6-month-old, 6.
And this is based on research?
Yes.
Okay, that's really fascinating.
Bowlby, John Bowlby, father of attachment theory. And if you look at the animal kingdom, there's no child care, there are no babysitters, there's no little tiger going back to work. Okay.
So how does tiger mothers?
Sorry, tiger mothers.
I know that Marcy has a different perspective on this because, you know, during the break we were also talking about how difficult it is to be a mother and to also continue your career. I mean, I've worked on my career since the moment I realized what I wanted to do, and I feel like I'd have to put that on the back burner to have a child. But Marcy, you feel like that's not necessarily the case.
Well, I have respect for attachment theory, I really do. And from my perspective, it's about meeting your child's needs, right? Their basic needs and their need for love and affection. And there's too many of us in this day and age that have multiple platforms of our attention that require our attention. Not everybody has the bandwidth to stay home with their child 24/7, and so what do? So there's a lot of people perhaps watching going, well that might be true, but that's scary, I mean, and terrifying, and what do I do with that? And I was raised by two parents that worked full time, but I was in the care of really loving people. And so I never felt a void, and I think that there's a way around that. What I was saying to you in the break is that I do believe there's room. I think there's room for your career. I think there's room, if you choose to have a child one day, for you to nourish and have a great relationship with the child or more, and have a great relationship. It's when it gets out of balance, okay, when we don't feed one or the other for too long, that our children are going to suffer, you're going to suffer, your relationship's going to suffer on that. But by that same token, it's a tall order to also expect ourselves to have everything in perfect balance all the time. There's always going to be, shifts and the tides are going to turn, but can we bring ourselves back to center and know that we're attuning to ourselves, our relationship, and our children enough so that everyone is well taken care of.
Jessica, what do you think?
Somewhere in between. I love that you sort of added that things don't stay in balance. The whole balance thing drives me bonkers, because I think it's just, it's just selling women something that you can't have. You can't actually have balance. You have moments of balance, but that's about it. And you can't have it all. I'm sorry to say it, you can't have it all. You can have all of it on a certain day, certain parts of whatever the all is, but you have to pick and choose different times of your life for what the all is. And your baby doesn't need a part-time mom. You cannot be a part-time lawyer and get paid. You cannot be a part-time judge. You cannot be a physician and say, I'm sorry, I'm actually not going to be here for 6 hours of the day and get paid. You cannot be a mother and not physically be there. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. I am extraordinarily lucky that I had children before this horrendous economy. I feel for the women who can't, really just in those first couple of years, you just hit pause and just parent. Because that is having it all right then and there. And there are times as the kids get more independent, there's preschool, there's school, and there's times to have something. And there's also times where it's perfectly appropriate for men to stay home. Most men can't get it done in the first couple of months.
Do you feel that mass media is a little misleading when it tells women that they can do it all? Because you do see that all the time.
That they say that to women. It is an extraordinarily cruel thing. I would never look at a woman who's pregnant and go, oh, you're going to go to work and you're going to feel good about leaving your kid. You're going to feel horrendous about leaving your child, because nature creates that. Because when you feel like you're ready to go and that baby feels like you're ready to go, that's actually when you're ready to go. And if we had some kind of maternity leave that supported the way that our bodies are meant to function, we would all be so much healthier.
All right.
I wanted to add a comment to what you're saying. I really agree with that. I think that there are stages of life where you just don't mess with those stages. And there's a kind of like a silver thread. As a mother, I know this. There's a silver thread that connects me to my child. And when either one of us are too far apart for too long, we're just feeling it. And part of it is also the function of breastfeeding. Literally, my breasts would swell up, and if that wasn't experienced by me, I'd be in physical pain, and that's a really, really beautiful function of nature. We are really primed. We're emotionally primed for this, and so I take great offense to. Please forgive me, but I'm going to be blunt about this. I take great offense to doctors who say, let your baby cry it out. Leave the baby in the crib. Why don't you just bottle feed the baby? Go ahead, go back to work. This is ridiculous. It's not ridiculous from the point of view of ridiculous logically. We do not understand the emotional scars that we leave our children with when we detach. Human disconnect, the cause of all psychopathology. This is what I spend my life writing about. This is what I spend my life fixing. I fix human disconnect.
All right, well, we'll leave the audience with that food for thought during the break. And when we come back, our final segment, which will be about how society pressures us to have kids, but then punishes us after we do so. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Point. Our final segment today has to do with the fact that society isn't really too kind to women who do end up having kids. You know, when it comes to maternity leaves, when it comes to certain restaurants, when it comes to certain flights, they don't really want to have children there. In fact, Jamie Grumet, and I'm sure you know of her from her infamous Time magazine cover where she's breastfeeding her son, talks about this situation and shares her point of view.
Hi, my name is Jamie Grumet. I'm the founder of the FI Foundation, and we are dedicated to addressing the orphan crisis through the empowerment of women in the communities affected. My point is the complete lack of paid parental leave in the United States is destructive to both individuals and society as a whole. The United States is the only industrialized country in the entire world without a mandate for paid parental leave. That, in addition to societal views of success in the U.S., put pressure on individuals, often making them feel like they need to choose between family and career. The lack of support for parents who want to have a career has caused divisiveness among parents of varying child-rearing practices. The evidence we have of the detrimental effects of lack of paid parental leave, we can just look to the Human Rights Watch 90-page report, which revealed that the weak and non-existent parental leave laws for working parents who have recently given birth or adopted a child contributed to delayed vaccinations, postpartum and post-adoption depression, as well as other health problems, often resulting in mothers giving up breastfeeding before they had desired to do so. Many of the parents followed through the study ended up taking unpaid leave, going into debt, and seeking public assistance. And not only that, the same-sex couples were denied even unpaid leave. So we should hold ourselves to a higher standard and demand that the government mandates paid parental leave, maternal and paternal leave, for all people who have made the decision to work and expand their family. It's not only important for the well-being of individuals, but the future of our economic well-being.
Jamie brings up a lot of great points there, and when you really think about the United States, which is supposed to be the best country in the world, right? Why is it that we punish mothers, and not only mothers, but also fathers when it comes to having children? We don't give maternity leave, paternity leave. We don't give them an opportunity to actually stay at home and raise their child. I mean, Jessica, what do you think about this? I know we talked about, career versus parenthood, but this kind of makes, the combination of both impossible.
It does make it impossible, it was interesting because I was talking to a group of journalists from Scandinavia, and I was talking to them about the fact that, if you want to have a kid here, you better plan, for your career and stuff. And they looked at me like I was crazy. I was like, you don't understand. Like, your job will be gone. You're not going to advance. That's it. End of story. The fat lady kind of has a baby and sinks. So it would be a great equalizer for women. Physiologically, yes, secondarily, it would be nice to have paternity leave, but physiologically, to allow women to have their baby and to bond with their baby and to keep their job would also be tremendous. It would be a tremendous gift to the children, too, because these are kids that are most at risk, the single young moms. Like, why can't they get some kind of support?
I don't know how they do it. I mean,
we pay one way or another,
right?
And we pay in a lack of education. We pay in crime. We pay and that they're on, just sort of a different welfare. But it would be really the human thing to do to support mothers, and I can find no good reason why we.
Judy, what are your thoughts on this?
I have very strong thoughts about this. This has to do with cause. We're back to the consciousness behind what's going on. And the people who are making these laws are probably, I'm going to make a great big assumption, multi-generation transmission process, another fancy word for the hand-me-down pathology from mother to mother to mother to infant. Okay, the consciousness is off. We're in a selfish consciousness. We send our children away to daycare. We give them up for babysitters. We put the me before the infant. And so, of course, now we've got a hologram going on. We've got the selfish consciousness projected out into a a national consciousness.
But Judy, what about mothers who don't have, the luxury of staying home and taking care of their kids? I mean, think about the economy. Think about how you really need a dual income household just to make ends meet these days. You have companies like Walmart that will have full-time employees that are still so poor that they have to have the government subsidize their health care. So I mean, these are real problems. So yes, in an ideal world, the man will go to work and he will provide for the family and everything will be fine, but it's not a reality anymore.
And that's why I write about damage control. You're right. Not everyone can follow this beautiful unfolding of Mother Nature.
But countries that with significantly less money than us are able to support these women, so that so that the man isn't necessarily, the husband or whatever, or even the other woman, because that does happen. But the man that's bringing in this income can be the system that you've paid into, that we've paid endlessly into. And for some reason, we can get our roads paved, but we can't take care of kids. Well, and I find that baffling.
We've gotten to a point where we can't even get our roads paved because we're spending so much money abroad by, terrorizing other countries with our so-called war on terror. But that's a completely different topic. But go ahead. I really want to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, no, I feel like it's a systemic issue. And an unconscious one in terms of the way this country is operating across the board. I mean, we talk about, we think we're not a class system. Of course we are. We are. I mean, the difference between the wealthy that are this big, that control most of the commerce, and poverty in this country. And you know how many, I don't know the recent stats, but it's alarming how many children are hungry every single day in the United States of America. And so the bottom line, whether we're talking about maternity leave or social services, the educational system, the health care, there's the have and there are the have-nots. And there's the real issue from my perspective is that there's too much of a huge chasm between the two. And that's the broader issue here.
That's really
that trickles
interesting,
down.
because back in the day, as I mentioned very early on in the show, people had children because of the economic benefits of having children. The children helped them tend to the farm, and it was basically having, little helpers running around. But these days, it seems like having kids is the exact opposite. It's a little bit of luxury. You have to be, pretty wealthy in order to comfortably have children, stay at home, believe in attachment theory and actually carry it out. And I love that you use the word parasites.
They are parasites.
Oh, okay. I'm liking this. Go ahead.
They are. I love them, but they literally are parasites, and we actually call the kids like the barnacles because they're always stuck to you, Okay. And sometimes you just want to shake them, but that's that's part of like be careful what you wish for.
Right.
You want kids that love you, that want to touch you, and they're always on you, and then you're kind of like, can I have my body back? But that's the reality. And I just want to go back to like the kid-free restaurant and travel and stuff.
Sure.
Just because you've had children does not mean that the world cares about them.
That's a great point.
That's a great point. Babies are cute or whatever. To me, babies are cuter when I'm fond of the parents. And if I've gotten myself an evening out with my girlfriends or an evening out with my husband and we have no children with us, I am very clearly looking to go somewhere where nobody else's children are too, And so, there is, and I know the attachment parenting, I'm 50% on board with it. Like, I love the kids, I want to be with them. But I don't necessarily want to see kids in every adult place. It's not, they are the center of my world, but I recognize that they don't need to be the center of yours.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because I feel like oftentimes and I don't want to make a blanket statement, it's not all mothers, but most mothers feel like since their world revolves around their child, everyone else should feel the same way about their child.
I wanted to make a point about taking the financial hit. Yes, I heard your point, and it's a very valid point. Not every mother can afford to stay home. Okay, but I'm going to say this, and I'm going to stand by this. They're going to pay one way or the other, because I see them later. I see them because their children are symptomatic. They pay. They just pay.
So that's an interesting point.
And so
would you argue then?
I mean, I don't know. I'm around some young adults who, had parents that both worked, and they seem okay. I mean, every 20-something is a little fucked up here and there and stuff. But I mean, I think that there are ways to do it, and some people just naturally are better equipped to deal with the world. And
Okay. So if there's a mother and she is just hell-bent on going back to work, then that baby is better off with a loving housekeeper. Why? Because that mother is not able to give up that piece of herself to do the job. So yeah, in that case, hey, I'm all for it. Better that the baby is in the hands of a loving caretaker than a mother who just doesn't have it in her to give. So again, we've got to take it case by case basis, but we do pay. This is what I do in my office. I sit there, connect the dots between the symptom and the disconnect, and the symptom and the disconnect. This is what I do all day long.
Are we discarding the importance of outside influences? Because you can be the best parent on the planet. You could be a stay-at-home mom with the economic means to do so, but as soon as they go to school, there are so many little outside influences that really play a role in how your child develops.
Well, by the time your child is 4, there's actually coaches that are going to help you get your child into the right school, so you'll have none of these problems. I don't think you understand how micromanaged children's lives can be right now, which I think is how they're really going to end up in your office.
Well, I actually really want Marcy to have the last word on this, because I can see you're about to say something, so you have some thoughts brewing.
I think it's an integrative approach to the whole thing, and I just feel that at the end of the day, ideally, I love when you talked about areas in life where, ideally, if parents can stay home with their children in the formative years, fabulous. But if it's not the reality for most people out there, I really believe it's about quality of care versus quantity of hours in a day. I just do. I think that when a child knows that their parents coming at the end of the day and are going to be connected and attuned and attentive and loving, and that they're in the loving arms of someone else in the meantime, I don't think they're going to be scarred and damaged. The folks that come into my office that are struggling, it's usually because they didn't have their emotional needs met. The parents could have been there 24/7, 7 days a week, but they were not checked in. So it wasn't about how many hours in a day, it was about the quality of care. And and I say that for the benefit of all of us, because we live in a very complex world now. There's a lot going on, and we are juggling a lot. And I don't think it's possible to be perfectly balanced all the time, but I think it's possible to be balanced enough. We just have to find our way in a way that is conscious and intentional.
All right, I want to thank our panelists for this great discussion. I definitely enjoyed it. Jessica Gottlieb, Judy Rosenberg, Marcy Cole, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Is there anything that you're working on, Jessica, that you'd like our audience to know about?
Well, I'll be speaking at the Health of 8 conference in Sydney, Australia at the beginning of March 2nd.
All right, that sounds great. Judy?
I'm working on my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, which will be ready for publication in the next few months. And I just finished a book on quitting smoking called Dr. Judy's Habit Breakers Stop Smoking Plan. And this is what happens when there's a hole in the soul. People fill it with addictions. So there's the result.
Excellent. And last but certainly not least, Marcy Cole, where can our audience learn more about you?
So 20% of women today in this country don't have kids, whether by choice or circumstance. So last year I created a platform. There are 2 sites. One's called childlessmothersconnect.com and one's called cmama.org. And it's a place for women, whether they don't have kids by choice or circumstance, to come together in community to talk about their experience, to collaborate, to share resources. The nonprofit supports single, childless women, couples, and partners who desire to adopt our mission of helping kids in need, whether that's adoption, foster, mentor. There's several ways to connect with kids, and there's several ways to mother. It's not just a biological experience, right? There's many ways we can share our love with the world.
Yeah, this is a topic that we could talk about all day, because adoption, foster care, in vitro fertilization, there's so many different aspects of parenting and conceiving that I'd love to discuss, but unfortunately we're out of time. I also want to thank our Point contributors. First contributor was Jessica Valenti. If you want to find out more about her, you can go to jessicavalenti.com, or you can read her most recent book, which is Why Have Kids? A New Mom Explores the Truth About Parenting and Happiness. Lauren Sandler was also one of our Point contributors, and she has a forthcoming book titled One and Only, and it will be available in June. And last but not least, Jamie Grumet. You can visit her blog at IamNotTheBabysitter.com, and you can also learn more about her at thefayfoundation.com. I'm Anna Kasparian. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, we love to read your comments. We love to get feedback, so please share your comments in the video. And also, you can check me out at the Young Turks at youtube.com/TYT Live. We'll see you next week.